You have grass seed sitting in a bag right now, or you are about to buy some. And you are going to do what everyone does. Scatter it, water it, watch it, wait for it. You have probably done this before. Maybe it worked, mostly. Maybe it worked in patches. Maybe you watered it every day for 2 weeks and still ended up with bare soil where seed should have been. Here is the question nobody asks at the garden center. What if the seed is not the problem? What if the problem is the moment you put it in the ground? There is a step that most home gardeners skip entirely. It takes about 10 minutes. It costs nothing extra. And in my own test plot, it produced visible germination in less than 24 hours, on a side where untreated seed showed nothing at all. I ran the test 3 times, in 3 different conditions before I was willing to say it out loud. That is what I am going to show you today. My name is Ken Fujita. I grew up in rural Nagano, Japan, among my father's vegetable rows and fruit trees. He taught me that the moment of planting is not the beginning of the process, it is the middle of it. Preparation happens before the seed touches the ground. I have been growing food and tending grass in my American backyard for over 30 years. Every method I share here, I have tested in my own soil, in my own climate, before I say it to you. That is not a claim. That is a practice. Now, the problem with conventional seeding, and why it fails more often than the bag will ever tell you, you buy the seed, you read the bag, you prepare the soil, you scatter, you water, then you water again and again, day, sometimes twice a day, because the bag says to keep the seedbed consistently moist. That phrase, consistently moist, is doing a lot of work. What it means in practice is that you are managing soil moisture through wind, sun, temperature swings, and the occasional mist morning. The seed sits there, dry coat still intact, waiting for enough sustained moisture to trigger the germination process. That waiting period is where most home lawns lose. Not because the seed is bad, not because the soil is wrong, because the seed is fighting against its own protective shell from the moment you plant it. And the environment is rarely cooperative enough to win that fight quickly. The technical term for what happens inside a seed before the root emerges is imbibition, the absorption of water through the seed coat that wakes the embryo and starts cellular development. In a dry seed planted in soil, imbibition depends entirely on soil moisture reaching the seed coat consistently over time. When that consistency breaks, one hot afternoon, one missed watering, the process slows or resets. That is not a failure of effort. That is a failure of timing. The seed was not ready before it went into the ground. Honestly, just skip it. If this is the kind of thing you wish someone had told you years ago, that is what this channel is. One method, once a week, tested for 30 years before I ever say it out loud. Nothing sold to you. Subscribe if you want the next one. Now, pregermination, and what it actually means. Pregermination is the practice of starting the imbibition process in controlled conditions before the seed is planted. You soak the seed in water at room temperature, roughly 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, for a defined window of time. During that soak, the seed coat softens. The embryo begins to activate. Cellular division starts. By the time the seed goes into the ground, it is not starting from zero. It has already crossed the first biological threshold. My father called it waking the seed before asking it to work. He used it in Nagano on vegetable seed, on rice, on anything where germination speed and uniformity mattered. The principle is the same. You are not forcing the plant. You are removing an obstacle. What you need is a shallow container, mine is an old orange plastic tray, clean water at room temperature, and your grass seed. Nothing else. Spread the seed in a single layer, cover it with water just deep enough to submerge it, and let it sit. The window is 12 to 20. 4 hours depending on the grass variety. Cool season grasses, like Kentucky bluegrass, or tall fescue, do well at the 12 to 16 hour mark. Warm season varieties can go a little longer. There is one timing risk, and I want to name it plainly. If you let pregerminated seed sit too long before planting, the radicle, the first root, begins to extend. Once it extends past about 2 to 3 millimeters, the seeds tangle, and spreading them becomes difficult without damage. Do not start the soak unless you know you can plant within 24 hours of pulling the seed from the water. If your weather changes and you cannot plant, spread the seed on a dry cloth in a cool room and plant as soon as conditions allow. Do not let it sit wet in the container past the window. Stay with me. By the end of this, you will know exactly what pregerminated seed looks like against untreated seed at 24 hours, and what the results were across all 3 tests I ran. Now, the test I ran, and how I set it up. I ran 3 parallel plots at the same time. 1 outdoor raised bed, direct comparison. 2 indoor trays on the same bench, same light exposure, same watering schedule. 1 with pregerminated seed, 1 with dry seed planted conventionally. I used the same grass variety across all 3 tests, measured from the same bag, weighed to the same density per square foot. The outdoor test introduced one variable I did not plan for. An unseasonable cold front came through 4 days into the test. Nighttime temperatures dropped below freezing twice. I considered pulling the outdoor test entirely. I did not, because the seed was already in the ground on both sides of the plot, and I wanted to see what the temperature stress would do to each type. Now the results at 24 hours and what they actually looked like. At the 24-hour mark on the indoor trays, the pregerminated section showed the first thread-thin radical emergence across roughly 60 to 70% of the seeded area. Fine white root tips, just visible at the soil surface. The untreated tray, no visible emergence. Bare seed on bare soil. That is not a marginal difference. That is a total difference. Same tray, same soil mix, same water schedule, same light. The only variable was the 10 minutes I spent soaking, 1 batch the night before. By day 3, the pregerminated tray had visible leaf tissue, the coleoptile, the protective sheath around the first shoot, emerging in a dense, even line across the surface. The untreated tray showed first radical emergence beginning. The pregerminated seed was 3 days ahead on a 3-day-old timeline. By day 7, the pregerminated tray was thick and upright, dense enough that I could see no bare soil between the seedlings, close enough to its first trim. The untreated tray was showing good coverage but thin, the kind of result most people would call a reasonable outcome, because they have nothing to compare it to. That comparison is the point. If you have only ever seen untreated seed results, you do not know what you are missing. Have you used a pregermination method before, on grass seed or any other seed you grow? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. The outdoor test showed something additional. When the frost hit on day 5, the untreated seed, which had only just begun imbibition, lost ground. Germination on that side of the plot stalled for 2 to 3 days after the cold nights. The pregerminated seed was already past that threshold. It had leaf tissue in the ground before the frost came. It slowed, but it did not stop. When temperatures recovered, the pregerminated side resumed growth within 48 hours. The untreated side took closer to 5 days to catch back up. This is the real argument for pregermination in a variable climate. You are not just gaining speed under ideal conditions, you are building in a margin against weather disruption. The seed that is already growing is more resilient than the seed still waiting to begin. Now, what all 3 tests showed together. Outdoor test, pregerminated versus untreated. Pregerminated reached visible turf at day 10. Untreated reached comparable coverage at day 17. 7 days slower under the same conditions, with the additional frost setback. Indoor tray. 1. Identical light and water pregerminated at visible coverage by day. 7. Untreated by day. 11. 4 days behind, indoor tray. 2. Reduced watering schedule to simulate inconsistent moisture. 1 watering missed on day 4, pregerminated showed minimal setback. Untreated showed significant setback. This was the most instructive test. When moisture management is imperfect, which describes most home gardeners most of the time, The gap between pregerminated and untreated seed widens considerably. The cost difference between the two methods, nothing. The time investment, 10 minutes of preparation the evening before planting. A shallow container, room temperature water, and the patience to let the seed sit overnight. 10 minutes of work, a container you already own, 0 additional cost, and a margin of 4 to 7 days in germination speed. That is the trade. Now, whether this is the right method for your situation and what to do if the timing does not cooperate. Pregermination is most valuable in 3 situations. Overseeding an established lawn, where fast germination means the new seed can compete with existing grass before it gets shaded out. New lawn establishment on bare soil, where early coverage reduces erosion and weed pressure. Bare patch repair, where you want the fastest possible closure. It is less useful in 2 situations. If you are seeding into very cold soil, below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, pregerminated seed can suffer shock at planting. Let the soil warm before seeding at all. And if you cannot guarantee the ability to water within the first 48 hours after planting, dry seed may be more forgiving of a delayed start because it has not yet begun the process it needs to complete. The honest limitation of this method: pregermination accelerates germination. It does not improve seed-to-soil contact, it does not compensate for poor seedbed preparation, and it does not eliminate the need for consistent moisture after planting. The seed still needs water in the ground. You are buying time at the start of the process, not eliminating the process. I would rather tell you what this will not do than have you trust me less later. Now, 3 safety points, and I will not skip them. First, temperature. The range I found most reliable for the soak is 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Below 60, the process slows, and you may need 18 to 24 hours rather than 12 to 16. Above 75, you risk encouraging fungal activity in the water. A visible slime or sour smell tells you it has started. Discard that water and rinse the seed before planting. Second, a flat tray with a thin layer of seed soaks more evenly and more safely than a deep bucket with seed piled at the bottom. Oxygen cannot reach the seed at the bottom of a deep pile, and anaerobic conditions accelerate fungal growth. Third, children and pets. Soaking seed water is not harmful, but discard it after use, and do not leave open containers of standing water accessible to small children or animals. Yuki, my wife, keeps a shallow ceramic dish in the kitchen for this. She has used it for vegetable seed for as long as I have known her, and her seedlings come up even and fast every spring. She pointed out correctly that the method is the same whether the seed is going into a raised bed or a lawn. I have learned not to argue with her about plants. 10 minutes of preparation, a dish, water, and the evening before you plan to seed. Consistent moisture afterward. 4 to 7 days faster. No additional cost. Pregerminated seed planted at the right moment into prepared soil with adequate moisture in the days that follow. That is the method. Walk away. Next time, I am going to show you how to read your soil before you seed, what it tells you about drainage, compaction, and whether your seedbed will hold moisture long enough for any germination method to work.